Okay.
So I have a question. So this is the whatever link we're on. This is the right link going forward for this session. These
Yes. Those of you who are
okay.
confused, there was just a problem that some people who originally had logged in to the old one. We got here first, and therefore it prevented people from getting into the correct link. Okay, so we're all here. We're in illumination class. Good to see you all. We're going to begin with some prayers. You know these prayers for the most part, but let's begin. Sangye churang suki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kapsu chi dagi chushegi pe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupa shok. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. So this means we're taking Mahayana refuge. So we're saying we're taking refuge until I'm enlightened. You don't see such terminology in the general taking of refuge. Through the collections I create, through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha in order to benefit all migrating beings. Sangye churang suki chognam la jangchu badu dagni kapsuchi dagi chunin gipe sognam ki drola penchir sangye drupasho. See if you can try to, by the force of those words, recall the entity, sort of like the actual state of taking refuge, which is concern or fear about, at an absolute minimum, the suffering that we might encounter in our future lives. In a more sophisticated sense, fear about, remaining in cyclic existence in general, even if it were in the upper realms. But the Mahayana refuge, fear that we might not be able to help sentient beings without the guidance and the refuge provided by the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And then in the sense of collecting merit and purifying negativity, short mandala offering, by offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure Lama, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be trained. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. And then if you would be kind enough, Karen, to put up the foundation of good qualities as we're starting a new unit. You have it at your disposal there? Yeah, there we go. So, while Karen's doing that, this is a sort of a glance meditation on the Lan Rim, composed by Lama Tsong Khapa, as I've mentioned probably several times before, when he was at Reading, where the Kadampas lived north of Lhasa. Are you able to find it, Karen? Shanka, do you have it? You're the co-host, or who's the co-host?
I can
So for all of the delays. Are we making progress, or are we?
No, Shanka, if you don't have it, I can go into my files and get it. For some reason, I'm not pulling it up from the Shanti Davis site.
I have it if you'd like to make me co-host,
Thank
Karen.
you. Thanks, Sheila. I'll do it right
Oh.
now.
And that was Jennifer. I was so
Oh, that was Jennifer. Oh,
Yeah,
thank you,
Jennifer.
Jennifer. Hang on.
I have about 6 translations, none of which are the FPMT version, so sorry.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. The foundation of all good qualities is correct devotion on the kind and perfect guru. Here it's the translation says the foundation of good qualities is the kind and perfect guru. It's the correct devotion to the kind and correct guru, who is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely on them with great respect. Understanding that the precious freedom of this rebirth is found merely once. That means in a long time. Of course, it doesn't mean that you only find a perfect human rebirth once at all in the entirety of cyclic existence, but there's such a great span between the finding of perfect human rebirths, if you're not practicing the path, that it's like finding it just once. It is greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please bless me to generate the mind that takes its essence unceasingly day and night. This life is as impermanent as a water bubble. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes, and that after death, just like the shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. Finding firm and definite conviction in this, please bless me to be always careful, to abandon even the slightest negative action, and to accomplish all virtuous deeds. Seeking samsaric pleasures is the door to all suffering, or utilizing it and enjoying them. We say chepe mingom. That means there's no, I'm not sure how they're translating it here. Chepe mingom means there's no satisfaction in enjoying cyclic existence. They are the door to all suffering, and they cannot be relied upon. Recognizing these shortcomings, please bless me to generate the strong wish for the bliss of liberation. So this is part of the thought of renunciation. Recognizing that wherever you're born in cyclic existence, whatever pleasures you experience don't alleviate the desire for those pleasures again in the future. There's no ultimate satisfaction. Led by this pure thought, mindfulness, alertness, and great caution arise. The root of the teachings is keeping the pratimoksha vows. Please bless me to accomplish this essential practice. Just as I have fallen into the sea of samsara, so have all other mothers transmigratory beings, all other sentient beings who have been our mother, exactly equal with us in having fallen into this ocean of samsara. Please bless me to see this, train in supreme bodhicitta, and bear the responsibility of freeing transmigratory beings. I think this must be an old translation, because the order of things, you would want to take on the responsibility of bearing freeing sentient beings before developing bodhicitta. That's one of the causes, what we call laksam. Even if I develop mere bodhicitta, wishing bodhicitta, but if I don't practice the three types of morality, the three types of Mahayana morality of abstaining from negative actions, collecting virtuous dharmas and benefiting sentient beings, the six perfections and so forth. If I only have wishing bodhicitta, I will not achieve enlightenment with that alone, even if I have recognition of emptiness. With my clear recognition of this, please bless me to practice the bodhisattva vows with great energy. Once I have pacified distractions to wrong objects and correctly analyzed the meaning of reality, please bless me to generate quickly within my mind stream the unified path of calm abiding and special insight. We say shamatha and vipassana. Having become a proper vessel by training in the general path, please bless me to enter the holy gateway of the fortunate ones, the supreme Vajra vehicle. So that means the teachings of Tantra and the practice of Tantra. At that time, the basis of accomplishing the two attainments, the common attainments, the common cities, and the supreme city of enlightenment, the basis of those is keeping pure vows and samaya. As I have become firmly convinced of this, please bless me to protect these vows and pledges like my life. Then, having realized the importance of the two stages, the essence of the Vajrayana, that means the generation stage and the completion stage, by practicing with great energy, never giving up, practicing 4 sessions daily, please bless me to realize the teachings of the Holy Guru. Like that, may the gurus who show the noble path and the spiritual friends who practice it, our companions in this practice, have long lives. Please bless me to pacify completely all outer and inner obstacles. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. This is one of the profound kinds of prayers that we make. Sometimes people from entering into the path, they have the desire to find their guru. I know the Venerable Sanghi Khandro, when she mentioned, when talking about her life when she was young, she was always thinking, where will I find my guru? Because of having made prayers like this in former lives. In all my lives, may I never be separated from perfect gurus. May I enjoy the magnificent Dharma. And by completing the qualities and stages of the paths, may I quickly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay, thank you. So because we had problems getting on to begin with, our minds may still be a little bit frazzled. Let's do a little bit of meditation now and try to set our motivation more thoroughly. Sit comfortably, relax your body. Let that stress in your neck, shoulders go. Sit comfortably with your legs crossed if you can. And place your attention in front on the breathing. So in the Satipatthana Sutras, in the commentaries, it mentions the Buddha sometimes meant the place in front, meaning the tip of your nose, but in general, it means just to the forefront of your mind. Recognize that you're breathing. Recognize that you're breathing in when you're breathing in. Note that you're breathing out when you're breathing out. Let go of all other thoughts and hold that in your mindfulness. Be alert. Notice if your mind is beginning to wander. Let go of those thoughts and consolidate your attention, your mindfulness just on the respiration. As we become familiar with this, you can add another factor. Recognize whether the breath is a long breath when you're breathing in or breathing out, or whether it's a short breath. So there's three things. You're recognizing the breathing, whether it's going in or out, and whether it's long or short. And having calmed your mind a little bit with this relatively gross object, the breathing, place your attention instead, place your mindfulness instead on the mental consciousness. First, noticing the contents of your mind. You may be paying attention to what is still coming in through your eye consciousness, if your eyes are not partially closed. Your body consciousness, the feelings of your body, tension or pain. Other contents like your mental state, whether you're agitated or calm, whether you're suffering or in a state of pleasure, mental pleasure. Memories, plans of the future, observations about the present, what delusions are present. All of these are like clouds in the otherwise pristine, clear light nature of our mind, which we don't pay attention to ordinarily. Even without avoiding the other thoughts, just still noticing the contents of the mind. There might be several things being present at one time. Try to see that within them, within the mind, these thoughts are arising like clouds in the sky. If we can deprive them of our attention, these various thoughts begin to lose their ability to sustain themselves in our consciousness, and we're left with just the clear light nature conventional clear light nature of our mind, non-obstructing, within it, we can develop all of the sublime qualities of the path, that which we don't have yet, and we can enhance that which we do have. We can eliminate bad thoughts. We can reduce our faulty states of mind, because those states of mind are not part and parcel of the nature of our mental consciousness. And we can abandon them so that they never come back. This is our recognition of our developmental Buddha nature, our conventional Buddha nature, or Buddha potential. That means that we can use our life now, this auspicious moment that the Buddha pointed out, life also called life of leisure and endowment. We can use it for higher purposes than simply finding pleasure, power, love, friendship, possessions, and so forth. Now, we can use it to ensure the continuity of future lives as a human. We can use it to develop the qualities of the path that can lead to either liberation or enlightenment. Strong renunciation, strong bodhicitta. And to do so, taking cognizance not just of our own suffering, in the case of the Hinayana path, as a motivating factor, but taking into account the empathy that we have for all sentient beings, seeing that we are completely equal with them, wanting to be happy, wanting to be free of suffering. We're completely equal in having the Buddha nature, the ability to do that. We're completely equal in having the right to do that. It's not as though only Caucasian sentient beings can achieve enlightenment, or that only males or females or whatever. All sentient beings have the right, the ability, and are equal in wanting to be free of suffering and to have happiness. They've all been kind to us, depthlessly kind to us in former lives as our parents, our mothers. They've been kind to us even when they were strangers, and providing the infrastructure for our lives. They've been kind to us even when they were enemies, in that they allowed us to practice patience, to develop compassion, to purify our negative karma as a human, rather than having to experience it in excruciating pain in the hell realms or the other lower realms. To think to repay their kindness, I could try to provide them with food and medicine and medical help and advice this lifetime, how to succeed. But that would never end. They would again suffer in future lifetimes. The only way that we can really benefit sentient beings is to lead them out of cyclic existence, either into liberation or enlightenment. To do so, we would have to achieve those states ourselves. If we achieve a liberation, we would be at the end of this lifetime in a meditative state, unable to benefit sentient beings. We've been our personal nirvana. So to benefit sentient beings perfectly, we have to achieve enlightenment for their sake. To do so, we need to accumulate the collections of merit and wisdom, which is very difficult to do if we don't know how to do that, how the Buddha explained to collect merit and how to accumulate the collection of wisdom, a meditation on emptiness. So the text that we're discussing, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary, the Gompa Rapsal, on Chandrakirti's Madhyamaka Vatara, which is his meaning commentary to Nagarjuna's fundamental wisdom, which in turn is Nagarjuna's explanation of Buddha's intention in teaching the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra. As that's the material we're going to be listening to, studying, I think that I'm going to participate today to listen, contemplate, means evaluate, analyze the various things that are being taught. And when I come to a correct understanding of them, when my doubts are erased, to place my mind on those in meditation to develop the wisdoms of hearing, contemplation, and wisdom. In order to accumulate the two collections, in order to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. I'm going to participate today with the ultimate purpose of achieving enlightenment so that I can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings out of suffering into everlasting happiness. Okay, so bring your attention back to the present. Good to see you. Hi, Sheila, Aida, Anna, someone with some Sanskrit letters, and Manu. We had a couple of week break. I hope you had a chance to relax and let's start off. If you have any questions, any Dharma itches that you need scratched, or any doubts about the teachings we've had or the readings that you've made in preparation for today. Anything? Mikhail, nothing? Oh, Diana has. Diana Brown.
Thank you. This is not a content question.
Okay.
But we are getting to the end of Jeffrey's compassion book.
Right.
Which for many of us is like an additional set of training wheels.
Right.
And will there be something else that might take up where this leaves off?
Right. So we've been augmenting Thupten Jinpa's translation with some publication book, Illumination of the Intention. We've been augmenting that with Jeffrey's translation of the first 5 mind generations, or we could say the first 5 bhumis, in his book, Compassion in Tibetan Buddhism. So there is another book that was composed by Anne Klein in conjunction with Jeffrey Hopkins about the first verses of the 6th bhumi. Paul, do you remember how far that goes?
Yes, it's a Path to the Middle. I believe it's the first 7 verses of chapter 6.
So that might sound like 7 verses. That's not very much, but it's a book, book length thing, and it has a lot of notes in Anne's study of those with various Tibetan lamas. So that's a very good book to get. It was called Path to the Middle. I don't have it right here, right in front of me, because we haven't gotten up to that point yet. So that might be something you might want to invest in. It may be available in some corners of the internet as a PDF or something like that. But we will be using that to augment Thupten Jinpa's translation in the sixth chapter. Does that help, Diana? Okay, good. Okay. So any questions about, in our last class, we began the fourth ground and we went through it and sort of finished the fourth ground, but I mentioned that we would go through it again because we just sort of put a primer on. Does anyone have any questions so far from what we've talked about up till now? Everyone is feigning that they have no questions. Okay, good. So let's go back. What's going on here? I know what's going on. So I want to put it this way. There we go. So the fourth ground, the radiant, we're gonna go back a little bit over this and fill in some things. The fourth ground, the radiant, has three parts, showing that joyous effort, or as Jinpa translates, diligence, sundru in Tibetan, I think virya in Sanskrit, is that right? Showing that joyous effort is superior on this ground, because on each of the grounds, there is one of the practices of the perfections. They don't have the perfections yet. Only a Buddha has the perfection of any of the 10 perfections. So there's a special practice of the perfection of joyous effort on this ground. The etymology of the name of this ground. And third, showing what is particularly relinquished, what is given up on this ground, or as Jeffrey says, the features of abandonment, what is abandoned on this ground. Okay, so showing that diligence is superior on this ground, effort. On this ground, more than the first three perfections, it is diligence that comes to be superior. As the text says, and this is quoting the first verse of Chandrakirti's Karikas, right? All higher qualities follow after diligence. It is the cause of merit and wisdom, the two collections. Where diligence comes to be set ablaze, that ground is the fourth, the radiant. So we mentioned this before. And I had mentioned that, we say that effort or enthusiastic perseverance is kind of like the mother of all achievements. Like what was it, the first Gulf War or the second Gulf War, I can't remember, it was called the mother of all wars or something like this. Here, mother means if you have joyous effort, and the reason we add the word joyous onto effort is that the real meaning of sundru or virya is not just any kind of effort that you do, but effort in creating virtuous karma, effort in virtue. So if you have that kind of effort, you can achieve all of the higher qualities. And of course, implicit with our understanding of the developmental nature of our mind, the developmental Buddha nature, we have this clear light nature. We can develop good qualities, but if you don't put effort into it, they're not going to, just recognizing that you can do it doesn't mean that you will do it. So you have to take effort to do that. Jinpa's translation continues, no higher qualities come about for someone who does not take joy in virtue. So that's the That's the crucial meaning of virya, this particular perfection. Because there is no higher qualities come about, because there is no engagement at all in generosity, in morality, in patience, and so forth. In contrast, for those who derive joy from having gathered or in gathering the qualities like generosity mentioned above, the qualities that he or she has already attained will be enhanced, and those not yet attained will be achieved. So we mentioned that in our meditation at the beginning. The clear light nature of the mind means that if you put effort into the meditations, you can develop qualities that you have not yet developed at all, and those that you have some little inkling of, you can increase them more and more. Therefore, all higher qualities, without exception, follow after diligence, and it is the cause of the two collections of merit and wisdom, or in other words, merit and gnosis, because the word wisdom here is probably sherab, the ordinary wisdom. When we talk about the collection of the two collections, we say sonam gisok and yeshe gisok. Yeshe is the word that we translate actually as gnosis. The ground where such diligence comes to be especially set ablaze is the fourth, the radiant. Since on the third ground, the bodhisattva had attained higher training in concentration, far more excellent than that of the first two grounds. So you have to remember, even though on the third ground, the special practice was the perfection, special practice of the perfection of patience, still on the third ground, there was a special kind of setting up the observation of a deepening kind of wisdom that was said to be different than on the first two grounds. We said the copper-like blaze of wisdom. From this, the bodhisattva had achieved a unique pliancy and permanently dispels laziness. Let's see. I'll read from what Jeffrey said there. On the third ground, a training in higher meditative stabilization is attained, you could say was attained, that greatly exceeded that of the first two grounds. On the fourth ground, a bodhisattva thereby attains a pliancy generated from meditative stabilization. So Jimpa leaves it a little bit unclear. He says, from this, he has achieved a unique pliancy. Jeffrey points it out more clearly. On the fourth ground, the bodhisattva attains a pliancy. So you remember what pliancy is. Anna, do you know what pliancy is? What that refers to?
That isn't the viscosity, is it?
No.
I just know.
I mean, you could say that your body is kind of, if it's not pliant, it's kind of like viscous. But that's when I talk about viscosity. Sometimes in our meditations, I'm talking about the fact that the mind, the clear light nature of the mind, provides no obstacles. So there's no. I jokingly say there's no viscosity. You know, thoughts can move back and forth quickly, but that's not the meaning here of pliancy. Who knows what pliancy means? Nadine knows.
I hope so. I think pliancy means that the body and mind are perfectly serviceable for meditation. Yeah.
So the body is perfectly serviceable for movement, and the mind has incredible ability to remain, to do whatever you want. It's said that when you have pliancy, mental pliancy, it's as though you think in your mind, I could count the atoms of the material in that wall. You have that kind of right now we get tired doing something for some period of time. So when we talk about the shamatha, calm abiding, the stages of concentration and so forth, before you achieve actual shamatha, which is a fully qualified mental samadhi, you might say, before you achieve that, you have to develop the pliancy of body and the pliancy of mind, and a special bliss of body and a special bliss of mind. We talked about that extensively when we had commentary on Lama Chopa, when I mentioned a couple of years ago at Shantideva Center, the verses about that and so forth, and in other courses. So since on the third ground, the Bodhisattva had attained higher training and concentration, far more excellent than that of the first two grounds. On the fourth ground, Jimba says, from this, on the fourth ground, the Bodhisattva achieves a unique pliancy that permanently dispels laziness. Why is that relevant? Because we're talking about the special practice of effort, of joyous effort. What prevents joyous effort is a lack of pliancy. So when you have that unique pliancy on the fourth ground, that permanently dispels laziness. So on this ground, the perfection of diligence comes to be superior. Making sense? David, what do you think? Makes sense? Eminently reasonable, right? Okay. So the next section, the etymology of the name of the ground. Here, the Sagata's children. Another way of saying the Tathagata's children, or the conqueror's children. Usually we in the text we say the children of the conqueror, the Jina Putra, in analogy to Raja Putra, right? The son or the children of the king, the Raja. Here it's another play on that. Here the Sugata's children come to have, through their special practice of the factors of enlightenment, the light of gnosis far brighter than the glow of shining copper. So why does it mention shining copper? Because on the third ground, that was a kind of radiance that one noticed, sort of presaging the development of deeper wisdom. There was kind of a copper-like glow. Now there's a glow, as Jeffrey says, therefore the Sugata child, an illumination arises, produced from a greater cultivation of the harmonies of perfect enlightenment, surpassing the copper light, meaning that was observed on the third ground. So Jeffrey translates the harmonies of perfect enlightenment. Jimpa translated what here? The factors of enlightenment. What's the name of those? Does anyone remember? DW, can I say, because there's two Dianas. DW, do you remember what the Sanskrit is? It's sometimes translated as harmonies, sometimes translated as factors of enlightenment, sometimes wings of enlightenment. Yeah?
I don't know the Sanskrit.
Yeah. Shankar, do you know? No. Oh, okay. Is Paul still here?
Yes, Venerable
Yeah.
Joe.
Oh, yeah.
Was that Bodhipaksha?
Yeah, Bodhipaksha. So sometimes, and we mentioned this before, sometimes it's translated as harmonies, sometimes as wings, and sometimes people are very adamant it's one or the other. But the word paksha does have both meanings. It can mean a kind of wing. Kind of makes sense, like that which helps fly you to enlightenment, the wings of enlightenment. Factors of enlightenment doesn't give a lot of taste. Harmonies of enlightenment, okay. So the text continues here. Why is this ground called a radiant? This is Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary on this. One might ask, here on the fourth ground, the Sugata's children come to have, through their special practice of the 37 factors of enlightenment, the 37 harmonies of enlightenment, the 37 wings of enlightenment, to a level far superior compared to before. Through their practice, they have a light of gnosis similar to, but far brighter than the glow of shining copper mentioned in the context of the third ground. Because this light of fire of perfect gnosis comes to be far superior on this ground, the bodhisattva ground is called the radiant. So that's etymology of that. What was the third ground called? Does anyone remember? Sheila, do you remember? Were you following? Karen?
Luminous.
No? Who knows?
Yes, joy, joyous.
The joyous, that's the first ground.
Luminous.
Luminous. So what's the difference between luminous and radiant? So something is kind of got some light, but now it's radiating out much more than on the previous ground. These very features are as stated below in the Precious Garland by Nagarjuna, so which, as you remember, Chandrakirti quotes copiously from the Precious Garland and some other texts by Nagarjuna, besides quoting the Dasha Bhumika and other things. So this is what is quoted by Chandrakirti in his Madhyamaka. Lama Tsongkhapa adds it here. The text says, the fourth is called the radiant because the light of perfect gnosis has emerged. Since that the bodhisattva has cultivated especially all the factors of enlightenment. Cultivated specially. Or as Jeffrey says, cultivates supremely the harmonies of enlightenment. As a fruitional or maturation effect of this, and you remember of the different effects, maturation effect or fruitional effect means where you're going to be reborn if you have a full path of action. As a fruitional effect of this, that bodhisattva on the fourth ground will be a king of conflict-free gods. The king, or as Jeffrey says, the king of the gods in the land without combat. So when we get to the sixth bhumi, at one point we'll talk about in detail all of the desire realm gods. So, you're still in the desire realm. You talk about lower than the devas are the asuras. And then of the devas, there are different levels within that realm. So now we're getting up to a point, the earlier bodhisattvas were born in various levels that were lower than this. Now that this bodhisattva will be born as the king of the gods in the land without combat. He will be skilled in utterly destroying the identity view and its derivatives. Or as Jeffrey says, he's skilled in quelling the arising of the view of the transitory collection. That the transitory collection is a real self. So I'm not sure what Chimpa is meant here by its derivatives. Jiksuk tawa rabjungwa kune jomche kepayan. Yeah, I don't know what Jimpa is translating as its derivatives. So the 37 factors of enlightenment, the 37 bodhipaksha, refer to the 7 sets, such as the following. Anyone has memorized what the 7 sets are? Can you demonstrate your Ida? Can you know the 7 sets? You didn't memorize yet? Can you unmute?
There's the 4 mindful establishments of the
Right,
body.
okay.
The abandonings, the 4 abandonings.
Right. In Tibetan, we translate it as the 4 abandonings, yeah.
And then the 4 manifestations.
4 manifestations means what?
I can't remember what they are, but and then the 5 faculties or something like that. Am I correct? But I can't list all of them.
Okay. What I was trying to encourage you that these are some of the things that if you have at your fingertips, it helps to have memorized these. Who can I ask here?
That's the best I can do.
Jennifer, do you know? Have you memorized the 7 sets? You'd have to look down. Okay. So as Aida said, there's 4 close placements of mindfulness, or the place 4 establishments of mindfulness. We'll talk about that in a minute. The 4 perfect, Jimpa translates the 4 perfect endeavors, or the 4, what does Jeffrey say? The thorough abandonings. So the words that are used can mean both, and it just depends on which of those things that you're talking about are more emphasized. So that means developing qualities. That means that's a kind of endeavor to develop qualities. Also, there are 2 that are abandoning qualities, or getting rid of faults and so forth. So we have the 4 close placements of mindfulness, the 4 perfect endeavors, the 4 limbs of riddhi, or supernatural feats, not FOOTS, FEATS. And then there are the 5 faculties and the 5 powers, which are the same, just intensified. That gives us 5. The 7 limbs of enlightenment, and then the 8-fold Arya path, the 8-fold noble path. So it's good to memorize those. In the Hinayana tradition, as it's practiced today, and let's say in the Theravada as it's practiced today, they're considered to be like the most important thing. I told you about the abbot at the monastery in Sri Lanka who said everything, that's all there is, that's, if you have this, that's the whole ball game. So in this regard, the first of these is the 4 close placements of mindfulness. And I wanted to mention to you, I got an email the other day from the Tibetan Buddhist Learning Center in Washington, New Jersey. So I think this is where Joshua Cutler has a center, right? And so over the years, they always have teachings every once in a while. Sometimes they've invited other kinds of other lamas. I remember Dobun Tuku teaches there often. Now they're inviting Geshe Yeshe Tapke on July 15th and 16th, and he's going to speak on the, let's see, what do they call it here? We'll give teachings each morning on meditative serenity, shamatha, the Great Seal, Mahamudra, and especially he's going to give commentary on the close placements of mindfulness. So you can find out about that if you go to their website. And in fact, you will be able to watch the videos of it afterwards without charge. They're not charging for them. That's next week. If you go to labsum.com, LABSUM, or in America speak, labsum, LABSUM. So that labsum means 3 trainings, right? Lapasum or labsum means the 3 trainings. So if you go to that labsum.com, you can find out about those teachings. I just wanted to mention that because Geshe Topke is one of the preeminent, thanks, Karen, you put that up there, preeminent scholars. He's lived in Sarnath for a long time. Sometimes he teaches at Gelongma Bhikshuni Thupten Children's Center up in, where is it, in Washington or Oregon? I can't remember where it is. It's in one of those states.
Washington, yeah.
In Washington. I had the honor of studying a little bit with Geshe Topke when I was at the Institute of Higher Studies in Sarnath, and he's incredibly well-versed and so forth. So if you get a chance to listen to those, I would recommend that. So in regard to this, I wanted to read a little bit from, let's see here, is this it? Yeah, the Satipatthana Sutta, Mahasatipatthana Sutra. So of the first of the 7 sections of the 37 wings of enlightenment, the first one is the close placement of mindfulness, or you could just say establishing of mindfulness. In some of the Hinayana suttas, they actually use the word upa also, so close establishing. In some of them, the word is not there, but in Tibetan we say, we translate it as the close placements of mindfulness. So that means placing the mindfulness on the body, on the feelings, on the mind, and on phenomena. And so in the Hinayana tradition, in the Theravada tradition, they are considered to be sort of like the whole ball game. So I want to read a little bit from a translation of this sutra, the Mahasatipatthana Sutta, by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, a contemporary monk. He says, the great establishing of mindfulness discourse. You can find this free of charge on the web also, under dharmatalks.org. So that's, the Pali way of writing dharma is D-H-A-M-M-A. They don't have 2 differing consonants adjacent to one another in their words. You might say, well, Dhamma has DH. Isn't that 2 differing consonants? But the H of DH is just part of that letter. That's sort of like an aspirated D. So dhammatalks.org, you can find this, the great establishing of mindfulness discourse. It's the 22nd discourse of the Digha Nikaya, which is the great collection of discourses of the Buddha. So let me read a little bit from the beginning here. So in another, to talk about Satipatthana, in another sutra, the Buddha states he states the following: Sariputta, or we say Shariputra, suppose that I had 4 disciples with 100-year lifespan, living for 100 years and endowed with excellent mindfulness retention, recall, and keenness of discernment. Just as an archer with a good bow, trained, dexterous, and practiced, could easily shoot an arrow, a lightweight arrow, across the shadow of a palmyra tree, right? That means a long distance. That great, they endowed with that great an extent of mindfulness, that great an extent of retention, that great an extent of recall, and that keenness of discernment, they would ask me one question after another on the four establishings of mindfulness. These four satipatthana. And I, asked again and again, would answered, they would remember what I had answered, and they wouldn't counter question me about it a second time. Aside from eating, drinking, chewing, and savoring, aside from urinating and defecating, aside from relieving sleepiness and weariness, that means taking a nap and sleeping, there would be no ending of the Tathagata's Dharma teaching. There would be no ending of the Tathagata's phrasing of the Dharma statements. There would be no ending of the Tathagata's quick-wittedness in answering questions. But those four disciples of mine in their 100-year lifespan, living for 100 years, would die with the passing of 100 years, and still not, I would not have finished all of the explanation about the four close placements of mindfulness. So in other words, in the Theravada tradition, it's considered to be such an important thing that that it has all sorts of details and so forth and so on. So let me just read a little bit from the Satipatthana Sutra itself. I have heard that on one occasion, usually when we translate it ourselves, we say, thus I have heard at one time. I have heard that on one occasion, the Blessed One, the Bhagavan, was staying among the Kurus, that is a group of people. Now there is a town of the Kurus called Kamala Sadama. There the Blessed One addressed the monks, bhikshus, and the monks responded to him, Lord, or Bhagavan. The Bhagavan, the Blessed One, said, this is the direct path for the perfection, for the purifications of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and distress, for the attainment of right method, and for the realization of unbinding, or liberation, I guess. In other words, the four establishings of mindfulness. So you may recognize there when we talk about these things, some of these words, overcoming of sorrow and lamentation. When the Buddha talked about suffering, especially at the time of death, there is sorrow, lamentation, chest beating, pulling out of hair, and so forth. So this kind of statement is very prominent for the Theravada, that this is like the direct path for the purifications of beings and so forth. So what are these four mindfulnesses? There is the case when a monk remains focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. He remains focused on the feelings, second one, so that one on the body, focused on the feelings, second, focused on the mind, third, and focused on mental qualities in and of themselves. That would be the phenomena. That was the fourth. Ardent, alert, mindful, subduing greed and distress with reference to the world. So I'm going to read just a little bit more about the body. So how does a monk remain focused on the body in and of itself? there is the case where a monk, having gone into the wilderness, into the shade of a tree or an empty building, sits down, folding his legs crosswise, holding his body erect, and establishing mindfulness to the fore. Or we say in our meditation, setting our mindfulness in the place in front. And it is a footnote to that. The bhikshu who translated this from Pali mentions that it sometimes people take fore or the place in front to mean the tip of your nose. Other times it just means to the forefront of your attention. Always mindful, he breathes in. Mindful, he breathes out. So that's what we've been doing in our meditations at the beginning. Breathing in long, he discerns or discriminates, I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns, I am breathing out long. Breathing in short, he discerns, I am breathing in short. Or breathing out short, he discriminates, I am breathing out short. He trains himself saying, I will breathe in sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe out sensitive to the entire body. He trains himself, I will breathe in calming bodily fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out calming bodily fabrication. Just as a dexterous, skilled turner or his apprentice, turner means someone who's making woodwork, I think, right? Or making vases. When making long turn, discerns, I am making a long turn. When making a short turn, discerns, I am making a short turn. In the same way, the monk, when breathing in long, discerns, I am breathing in long. Or breathing out long, he discerns, I am breathing out long. He trains himself, I will breathe in, calming the body fabrication. He trains himself, I will breathe out, calming the body fabrication. So I wanted to mention that a little bit so that you have a sense of what these, where these teachings are found in the Theravada canon. So there's similar kind of meditations about the feelings, about the mind itself, and about phenomena. So generally, when we talk about the four close placements of mindfulness in the Mahayana, so there's also a Maha Upasthana, Smriti Upasthana Sutra in the Mahayana, similar to the Mahasatipatthana Sutra in the Hinayana. And in there, it's said that these close placements of mindfulness are meant to bring about preparation to understand the Four Noble Truths. The Noble Truth of suffering, recognizing, being mindful of your body, being mindful of your feelings. You have an introduction to the truth of the origin of suffering. Okay, I'm missing some things here. So why is that? Why is that? In being mindful of your feelings, why is that an introduction to the truth of the origin of suffering? What is the origin of suffering? Does anyone remember? There are two factors. Shankar, do you remember the origin of suffering?
Karma and klesha.
Karma and klesha, good. Main one here is not just talking about karma, but it's especially talking about klesha. How did the klesha arise? Because of feelings. When you have a pleasant feeling, you develop attachment. You can develop attachment. If you're skilled, you don't develop attachment. If you have an unpleasant feeling, it can give rise to anger and so forth. So the close placement of mindfulness on the feelings is meant in the Mahayana explanation of it as an introduction to the origin or cause of suffering. And then the meditation on the mind is said to be an introduction into the truth of cessation, watching how things cease in the mind, among other things. It has many, many different meanings and ramifications. And then the meditation on phenomena, I would say the close placement of mindfulness on phenomena has to do with the truth of the path, introduction to the truth of the path. So I wanted to mention that a little bit so that we had some understanding of the context of that in the Hinayana Sutras. So then the second of the 7 sections of the 37, so we had the 4 close placements of mindfulness, now the 4 establishing, the 4 perfect endeavors, or as Jeffrey translates from the Tibetan, the 4 thorough abandonings. So in Tibetan, the word that is found is pangpa, which means to be abandoned, but it's translating from the Sanskrit, which has kind of like both meanings, both endeavor and abandoning. So what are these? Generating virtuous factors that have not yet arisen, increasing those that have arisen. So that makes more sense with endeavors, right? You're not abandoning something in developing those qualities. So when we, as I mentioned before, when we talk about the prayer, may the bodhicitta, may the precious supreme bodhicitta that has not yet arisen arise, and may that which has arisen not decline, but increase evermore. So that's kind of talking about these first 2, and also, generating virtuous factors that have not yet arisen. May the bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen, the second factor here, increasing those that have already arisen. May the bodhicitta that has arisen increase and grow. So we find also in other practices, in other kinds of prayers and meditations that we do, these 4 kinds of factors. So let's go about the other 2. The third one is not generating non-virtuous factors that have not yet arisen, not giving rise to negativities that you don't have at the present. So that means guarding your mind from creating these. And 4th one, perfectly relinquishing or abandoning those that have already arisen, right? So preventing something from coming into your mind that's negative. And if things are already there, abandoning those that have already arisen. So for instance, when we do the prayers of purification, like the general confession. Does anyone do the general confession? Shishak? Any of you do? Anna? Oh, Shanka, you do also? Anna, do you say yes? What in what context do you do that?
I get together with a group and we do it every Saturdays together as a group.
The general confession.
We do both, the 35 confessions and the general confession.
Okay, yeah, right. So there in the Mahayana, there are 2, famous kind of prayers. We've talked about the Sutra of the 3 heaps before, which is one of the sutras where Upali is asking the Buddha, is asking Manjushri how the bodhisattvas purify their downfalls, because Upali is the foremost of those trained in discipline in the Theravada tradition, let's say, in the Hinayana. And in that context, the Buddha explained that the bodhisattvas recite this sutra that's called the Sutra of the 3 heaps. Sometimes it's called just the confession, the Bodhisattva's confessions of downfalls, or the 35 Buddha confessions, where it's mentioned the names of all the Buddhas. And it also has then enumeration of the various kinds of negativities that you've created, explaining them in particular. The general confession was composed by, was it Ashvagosha, Paul? Do you remember? Or
I think so, Ashvagosha. Yes.
Ashvagosha. And in that, there's not the names of the Buddhas as a way of purifying negativity and creating merit. In the Three Heap Sutra, one of the heaps means the creation of merit. And one of the heaps is confessing, and heaps of ways of, what do we have? Confessing and rejoicing. So in the general confession, one has statements like having created, having confessed these things, I will not do them again in the future. So when we talk about the four opponent forces, one of the opponent forces is, to regret what's done and to make a promise not to do it again in the future, right? So that has to do with the second set of two, not generating non-virtuous factors that have not arisen, and perfectly abandoning those that have already arisen. Okay, so let's go on. So that's the four perfect endeavors, or the four thorough abandonings. That's the second. Then the four limbs of supernatural feats, or the four limbs of riddhi. We talked again last week, the last class rather. These are aspiration, effort, thought, and analytical, as Jimpa says, mind. Or is it, what is it? Aspiration, diligence, mind, and analysis in the form of concentration. Jeffrey translates mind as thought. So it's hard to say how a mind would be one of the limbs of supernatural feats. So what this refers to, in order to have these, what are called riddhi, the ability to walk on water and to go through walls and so forth and so on, one needs to develop single-pointed concentration, and you need to have other factors involved, sort of desire or aspiration, diligence, thought, and analysis in the form of concentration. I might have mentioned to you before, when Geshe Repton taught the Bodhipratapādipam, the Atisha's famous text, The Light of the Path, kind of like what Lama Zopa Rinpoche, when he was teaching for many years, he would give a retreat every year or a couple of years, called, what do they call it at the end? Light of the Path, or Lamp of the Path, or something like that, based on the name of Atisha's text. When Geshe Repton was teaching it in McLeodganj many years ago, Alan Wallace, the great teacher, was a monk at that time, and I remember him asking Geshe Repton, how could you develop these supernatural powers? Can you tell me the method? And Geshe Repton sort of chided him a little bit, teased him a little bit. He said, first you develop shamatha, and then I will tell you the method to know others' minds. That's what, some of these common riddhis, when it talks about the four limbs of supernatural feats, that includes knowing others' minds and so forth. So it's kind of like shamatha itself is like the hot water that you can make many beverages from. You can make tea, you can make oatmeal, or you can make coffee or whatever. And with that, then you need to add other ingredients to develop these riddhis. Anna, what are you thinking?
Thank you, Venerable George. I hope this isn't too silly of a question, but when you say to know others' minds, what exactly does that mean? I know you're going to say something about clairvoyance, but what does this really mean, if you don't mind my asking?
Yeah. So, and I don't have any ability like that, but from what I understand from the scriptures, it means that placing your attention on that other person, you can be cognizant of what they are thinking, the contents of their mind. I remember and again, I think I've told this story before, in Laudo, where some of you have been. I think, was it Jennifer? Did you go to Laudo? Oh, no, someone else had been. Laudo, which is in Solukhumbu in Nepal. It's the monastery that Lama Zopa Rinpoche in his previous life had meditated within the cave there that was shaped like a radish. And the Tibetan word for that cave was Laudo. And so in this lifetime, in his previous lifetime now, Rishi has passed on, he, in the previous life before that, he had vowed to build a monastery there. So in the last life, Lama Zopa built this monastery there. And we would always go during the certain times of the year to do the Mani retreat. Not M-O-N-E-Y, M-A-N-I, Mani retreat, reciting the sadhana of Avalokiteshvara and collecting hundreds of millions of Om Mani Padme Hums, all the participants that were there. When I was there and I was walking with Lama Zopa Rinpoche outside, and he was asking me about one other monk who Lama Yeshe had sent this other monk and I to count the pages of the collection of texts that Lama Yeshe had bought for Lama Zopa, the Tengyur. One layman had been selling these texts, and Lama Zopa, out of compassion for the man, knowing that the man was selling them in order to make money. If you sell sacred texts to make money to live on, it becomes a big obstacle, and for your spiritual development, creates negative karma and so forth. So partially out of compassion for that person, Rinpoche was buying these from them, and also, to have for Laudo, the collection, the Tengyur there. So as this other monk that had come along with me, we were sent to count all the pages to make sure there were no pages missing. Lama Yeshe had a very hard, sort of like very strong saying, every page that's missing, we subtract 5 rupees. And so it was part of that. And this other monk would make many, many mistakes. And Lama Zopa said, what did I think of this monk? And I was thinking in my mind, and I can't even, his name was on the tip of my tongue. I think he's passed away now. Nawang someone, I can't remember his name. Anyway, I'm thinking in my mind, he has this ability and that ability, but he makes this mistake and that mistake. And then while I'm only thinking of that, Lama Zopa, who is kind of like almost in trance all the time, if you've ever been with him, he starts to say out loud exactly what I was thinking, the same sentence structure, exactly the same words. So that's it's sort of a demonstration to me that Lama Zopa, you have to watch your mind around holy beings. Whatever you're thinking, they may be knowing what you're thinking word by word. So that has to do with the clairvoyance that knows others' thoughts. Part of the way that one develops that is by first analyzing in your own experience your own behavior when you get angry. If you can see yourself, if you have a mirror or something, or in analyzing other people when they get angry, when they get attached, how their face changes, how their body changes, and using that to surmise. First of all, you're not knowing what's on their mind. Surmising when you see that kind of physical manifestation in the future, surmising what is on their mind, and on the basis of that, concentrating on that. That's sort of like a way to lead into recognizing their mind. You're thinking, oh, they're thinking this. And then as you're concentrating on that, in addition to the fact that you have shamatha, tranquil abiding, you're able to actually, that leads you into being able to apprehend what their consciousness is thinking. Mikhail, what are you thinking? Notice I have no clairvoyance. I have to ask you.
Thank you. Among the good qualities acquired on the third ground, we talked about the 5 supernormal abilities, which are 5 or 6. Again, depends on the list. And what is the difference between these and the 4 legs of magical manifestation here?
So these are mainly talking about the first of those common siddhis. So when we talk about the 6 siddhis, siddhis, right? The first of them is called riddhi, and of that means being able to emanate bodies, being able to walk through walls, being able to walk on water, like Jesus is purported to have done, or maybe also to multiply the loaves of bread. So from a Tibetan Buddhist point of view, if you explain to a Tibetan Lama who's open-minded about the deeds attributed to Jesus, they would say he must have had this common siddhi of magical emanation, you might say, that ability to walk on water and multiply things and so forth. So I think that is the riddhi is the first of those 5 common siddhis. The common siddhis include other things like the knowing of others' minds, the knowing of your past lives and the past lives of other sentient beings, divine eye, divine ear, and so forth.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay. So then the next one is the 5 faculties, and the one after that is called the 5 powers. They have the same name. They have the same elements: faith, effort or joyous effort, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. They only differ in their intensity, and we'll talk about that at another time when they're achieved along the path. Up to a certain point, those factors are called the 5 faculties. Maybe it's on the path of seeing and beyond, they're called the 5 powers. I'm not sure about that. Okay, then the 7 limbs of enlightenment are the limbs of enlightenment of perfect mindfulness. Yeah, correct, or correct mindfulness. Sometimes you hear about right view or correct view, or here is saying perfect. So you could call it correct yangdak or perfect mindfulness, discrimination of phenomena, or Jimpa translates clear discrimination of the character of phenomena, effort, joyous effort, joy, pliancy, fifth, concentration, and equanimity. Those are called the seven limbs of enlightenment. And then the eighth of the seven, subsections of the 37 wings is called the Eightfold Arya Path. So these are the right view. Jimpa says right intention. Jeffrey translates right or correct realization, right speech, right aim of actions or end of actions. Jimpa just has correct action or right action, right livelihood, right exertion or diligence, or right joyous effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Okay, we've gone over those before, but just to revivify that in our mind as we're continuing on. Now, the commentary says, now the first ground is the basis for training. As far as the actual training goes, the higher training in morality correlates to the second ground, right? We talked about this before. The higher training in the mind, or in other words, the higher training of concentration, correlates to the third ground, while the higher training in wisdom correlates to the fourth, fifth, and sixth grounds. So here on this ground, the bodhisattva becomes especially endowed with the training of wisdom. Okay, so what do we say? On the first ground, that's the basis for training. The second ground, where we have the special practice in morality, right, is the higher training of morality, correlates to the second ground. On the third ground, we have a special practice in patience, and that correlates to the higher training of the mind or concentration. You might think that that sounds counterintuitive because on the fifth bhumi, you have the special practice of concentration, but here it's talking about the training in concentration. While the higher training in wisdom correlates to the fourth ground, where we have the special practice of joyous effort, the fifth ground, where you have the special training in concentration, and on the sixth ground, we have the special practice of the prajna paramita. So here on this ground, the fourth ground, the bodhisattva becomes especially endowed with the training in wisdom that is highly versed in the coarse and subtle aspects of the 37 factors of enlightenment. So so we're on the fourth ground. So this is now beginning the training of wisdom, higher training of wisdom, which is on the fourth, fifth, and sixth. So the fourth ground has this wisdom is especially trained, the wisdom that knows the 37 factors of enlightenment, or the 37 wings of enlightenment, the 37 harmonies of enlightenment, the coarse and subtle aspects of them. On the fifth ground, it will have to do with, I think, the Four Noble Truths, and on the sixth ground, the 12 links and so forth, that the wisdom that's being referred to. So this fourth, fifth, and sixth ground, although they're talking about effort, concentration, and wisdom, in terms of their training and wisdom, they have a special wisdom that knows in this ground the coarse and subtle aspects of the 37 factors of enlightenment. Okay. So then showing what is particularly abandoned or as Jim translates relinquished, thoughts associated with identity view totally cease. Or as we say, the view of the transitory collection, Jeffrey translates that, what is related to the view of the self is extinguished. So the Tibetan says, Rangdu tawa dang dewa yongsuze. That means Rang, usually we say dak, meaning the self, like we dagzin and so forth. Here it doesn't talk about the identity view. I think Jimpa's sort of superimposing something here. It says, what is related to the view of a self is extinguished or is abandoned, or let's say extinguished, ze, when we talk about extinguishment. Here on this ground, thoughts that are associated with identity view, namely the subtle identity view and the thoughts that precede it, such as grasping at coarse levels of I and mine, in terms of holding to a self, holding to sentient beings, holding, and so on, as substantially existent, as well as grasping at the self-existence of phenomena in terms of clinging to the aggregates, elements, sense bases, and so on, as truly existent, these will totally cease. The meaning of the word cessation here is that the bodhisattva eliminates those seeds of the twofold grasping, it's self and phenomena, right? Eliminates those seeds of the twofold self-grasping that are specific objects of abandonment to be relinquished by this ground. It is not the case that the entirety of self-grasping is annihilated. The sutra itself indicates the presence of innate identity view in such bodhisattvas. So that's a very complicated, it sounds a little bit complicated, but it's especially complicated because what's happening here is that Lama Tsongkhapa is paraphrasing a quotation in the Dashibhumika, remember the Ten Bhumi Sutra, that Chandrakirti quotes in his auto commentary. In that commentary, in that quotation from the Dashabhumika, let me see, I think I have it here. Oh, wrong one. Sorry, there we go. Ten Bhumika. So there are varying translations of this section. So the Dashabhumika is found in the Avatamsaka Sutra, right? Do you remember? The Avatamsaka is one of these Maha Vipulya Sutras, these huge Mahayana sutras that are sometimes compendiums of other smaller sutras put together. So in the Avatamsaka, or what is it called in the Chinese tradition? What do people call it? Clearly translated, what the
flower garland?
Flower garland sutra, right? So there is a quotation that Chandrakirti takes from the Dashabhumika. And we have in Gompa Rapsel and in Tibetan, we have this quotation in Tibetan. And it has a lot of words in it that seem to be quite problematic, one of which I had was seeking the translation from another sutra from that I didn't have, and Paul very kindly sent it to me. He had it from the what was it, Paul? From the
I'm drawing a blank.
I know it. Yeah. There was one term I was trying to find out in this translation, and it was a term, Kyangwa Dang Kumba. Kyang means extended, like Tara's right leg is extended and her left leg is drawn in, right? You know, Tara, one leg is sort of stretched out, one is drawn in. And this was in one Tibetan translation. And in another translation, several of the other translations had some complicated phrase that, let's see if I have it here. Kune langwe lakbar yoa dang dewa nam. And I noticed that particular phrase that was also translated as extended or drawn in was also found in the Rice Seedling Sutra. And in the commentary to the Rice Seedling Sutra by, who was the commentary by?
Amalashila, I think.
Amalashila's commentary to the Rice Seedling Sutra. Paul had been teaching that to some of the nuns at Shravasti Abbey, and they had found that very same phrase to be problematic and inquired with Geshe Drakpa and so forth. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make here is that Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary right here on verse 4.2d in Jimpa's translation, that starts out, here on this ground, thoughts that are associated with the identity view and so forth. That is a very complicated, it's Lama Tsongkhapa's synthesis of this long quotation in the Madhyamaka Vatara, which is translated in different ways in Tibetan. Sometimes it uses one long phrase, sometimes it uses extended and drawn in, like the legs of Tara and so forth. And so I think Jimpa has made some mistake here. I mentioned in our last class. Let me read what Jeffrey translated this section of Gompa Rapsel as. He says, the view of a self is the subtle view of the transitory collection which precedes the coarse conceptions of a self of persons and precedes the coarse conceptions of a person's belongings. That means I and mine, right? When we talk about Jimpa takes it as here on this ground, thoughts that are associated with the identity view, namely the subtle identity view, and thoughts that precede it. I think he's putting the word preceded in the wrong place, in the phrase that preceded, mundu droa, he puts it in the wrong place. Jeffrey has it, I believe, correctly. The view of a self, right? When we talk about the grasping to a self, the view of a self is the subtle view of the transitory collection, which itself precedes the coarse conceptions of a self of person. So what are the coarse conceptions of a self of persons? The view of a person as being self-supporting, substantially existent, right? That's considered to be the coarse or gross conception of a self. Jeffrey says the view of a self is the subtle view of the transitory collection, which comes before, which precedes the coarse conceptions of a self of persons and the coarse conceptions of mine or the person's belongings. So what's this getting at? On this ground, let's say, has the gross self gross grasping to a self of persons, the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent, was that already abandoned? What do you think, Stephen? You're nodding yes.
I believe so, Venerable George. Isn't that an intellectually acquired affliction, and so abandoned on the path of seeing?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So is that an intellectually formed? I mean, there is an intellectually formed version of that.
Right.
But that
would have been
does not have that doesn't
unitary. Yeah.
Go on.
That would have been the coarser, the coarser perception of self than sufficient, substantially existent. So no, I'm wrong.
Okay, good observation. So of these two views, say three views of the self, let's say the grossest is that the self is permanent, partless, and independent. Right? We talk about in the Theravada scriptures, in the Hinayana scriptures, that is said to be the gross selflessness of persons, or the gross self of persons, grasping to that. The Mahayana says that's not even that is not even countable as a how do you say, as a self grasping the self of persons, because there's no innate form of that. The person being permanent, partless, and independent. It's something that's generated because of tenet system that one has studied, perhaps the Vedas, the Hindu scriptures that talk about the Atma as being permanent, partless, and independent, at least as the Tibetans interpret their explanation of that. What the Hinayana scriptures, the Vaibhashikas, say is the subtle self of persons is a person being self-supporting, substantially existent. Mahayana says that is not the subtle self of persons, that's the gross self of persons, but it's qualified in a sense of being important because it does have an innate form. Grasping to the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent. There is an innate form of that. What does that mean? That means that from life to life, you don't have to have been exposed to certain tenets. There is an automatic feeling that the self is not different than the aggregates, but it's not exactly the same as the other aggregates, kind of like considering the five aggregates to be like salespersons in Macy's, and the sense of the self as being self-supporting, substantially existent is one as being like the department head. You know, you've got five salespersons, say salesmen or saleswomen or various combinations. The sense of the self is like the head of them, the head of the department. It's not different than the salespersons, but it's not the same as the salespersons. So the self is not considered in the sense of this gross self of persons, grasping at a gross self of persons. That sense of person is not considered to be the body aggregate. It's not considered to be the feeling aggregate, the discrimination aggregate, the compositional factors aggregate, or the mental aggregate, the mind, the aggregate of the mind. But it's not different from them. So that's called the gross, from Mahayana point of view, that's called the gross selflessness of persons. That does have innate forms. So it was not totally abandoned on the first bhumi. Only what the Vaibhashikas and other Hinayana schools say is the gross selflessness of persons namely that the person is permanent, partless, and independent, only that's totally eliminated on the first bhumi. How are we doing? Making sense? Doris, what do you think? You have a headache? Okay. Sheila, are you doing books? Are you doing the books? Or are you following? Okay.
Following. I'm taking notes.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm just joking. I thought you might be doing the finances of Shantideva Center or something like that. Okay. Ron, are you okay? You following more or less? Okay. Mikhail.
Thank you. Yeah, on which ground or part of the path is this gross self-grasping eliminated, abandoned?
So, okay. So different meanings of gross. Are you talking about the gross selflessness of persons of the Vaibhashikas or the gross selflessness of persons of the Mahayana?
Mahayana. Self-sufficient, substantially existent person.
So we understand that's the gross selfless of persons according to Mahayana.
Yeah.
The super gross, the permanent, partless, and independent, was abandoned on the path of seeing because it's only intellectually formed. This gross selflessness of persons, as it has an innate, from the Mahayana point of view, since it has an innate version, it is not abandoned totally on the first bhumi. It's not abandoned on the second bhumi totally, or the third bhumi. It still has subtler aspects that extend up. And what is meant by this quotation from the Dasha Bhumika is that the view of the self and the view of a person and so forth, that's referring to this gross selflessness of persons. That is the portion of that to be abandoned by the fourth bhumi is abandoned on the fourth bhumi. What does that mean? Because it is preceded by, in any kind of delusion, is always preceded by apprehension of the subtle view of the transitory collection, right? The root ignorance, you might say. Because part of that is now being abandoned. Inevitably, you will abandon some of the gross selflessness of persons. I'm watching your faces if you're following. This is a little bit subtle point here. Is it possible, Jennifer, is it possible to abandon the view of the self of being self-supporting, substantially existent on the basis of other kinds of logic? How do you abandon that view, that gross selflessness of persons? Do you know?
Does one abandon? You mean what method does one use to abandon?
Yeah, right.
I mean, does it relate to the Prasangika method?
So I'll give you a way to think. So in the Hinayana, there are methods to use to supposedly abandon that view, which is not talking about realization of emptiness of the person or phenomena. It's realizing that the person is not like the head salesperson, that holding that the self is the head salesperson. Is that sufficient to cause it to be abandoned? Those Hinayana methods? From their point of view, it is. From the Mahayana point of view, Nadine, do you know my American lingo? Means no. It's not sufficient because the view that holds the person as self-supporting, substantially existent is preceded by grasping at the person as being inherently existent, the view of the transitory collection. So that's what's meant here, and that's why I think Jimpa's translation sort of misses that point. I'll read again what Jeffrey Hopkins translated. The view of a self is the subtle view of the transitory collection, right? When he says the view of the self, he's paraphrasing Chandrakirti's karika, because he uses the word wrong, oneself, the view of oneself. He says the view of a self is the subtle view of the transitory collection, which precedes the coarse conceptions of a self of persons, or the gross, that means self-supporting, substantially existent, which precedes the coarse conceptions of a self of persons and of a person's belongings. So that means this conception of self and of I and mine, right? There's two kinds of jitta, or view of the transitory collection. The view that the view of the transitory collection that grasps the self, the conventionally existent self, as being inherently existent, and the view of the transitory collection that grasps the sense, the conventional sense of mine as being inherently existent. Mine doesn't mean your belongings, actually. It means the state of mind that thinks that is mine, like my, the view of the transitory collection grasping to my microphone here is not the microphone, not grasping to that, but the state of mind that thinks that is mine. Anyway, we talked about that before, and it will come again in the 6th chapter. So the view of a self is a subtle view of the transitory collection that precedes that grasping to a self-supporting, substantially existent person, the coarse conception of a self of persons, and the coarse conception of mine. And Chandrakirti refers to these latter as being related with the view of self. That means the view of the transitory, the view of the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent. He refers to those as being related with the view of self, because they're preceded by the view of the transitory collection. The view of the transitory collection, if you eliminate that, you eliminate the view grasping to the self-supporting, substantially existent person. You don't need any other supplementary meditation to eliminate, to abandon the view, the gross selflessness of persons, right? They are the conceptions that sentient beings and so forth. And so he's saying, and so forth there, he's summarizing from the Dashabhumika. There's a whole list of other things: the person, the self, the being, and so forth. They're different synonyms for self. They are conceptions of sentient beings and so forth, exist substantially self-sufficiently. Both this conception of a self of persons and that of phenomena, that means the adherence or grasping to the true existence of the aggregates, the dhatus, Jeffrey translates constituents, and sources, the ayutana, which he sometimes translates the faculties. Both the conception of a self of persons and that of phenomena, and an adherence to the truth of the aggregates, constituents, and sources are thoroughly extinguished. That's what the quotation from the Dashabhumika is. Lama Khapa is giving commentary on that. But even then, the meaning of extinguishment is that an abandonment of the seeds of the two conceptions of self that are to be abandoned on this ground. That's what's abandoned. What is to be abandoned on the ground? There's still more to be abandoned on the 5th ground, the 6th ground, the 7th ground, and so forth. But that which is to be abandoned on this ground is what is meant by extinguished. It doesn't mean it's totally extinguished. Both this conception of a self of persons and that of phenomena and adherence to the truth of the aggregates, constituents, and sources are thoroughly extinguished. The meaning of extinguishment is that an abandonment of the seeds of the two conceptions of self that are to be abandoned on this ground, and not extinguishment of all forms of the two conceptions, because the Sutra on the 10 grounds, the Dashabhumika, indicates that a fourth grounder has the innate view of the transitory collection as real I and mine. It's not abandoned until when? Remember? Oh, there we go. Okay, different people. Yeah. William, how many fingers did you put up? I did.
I put up 10.
Oh, no, you don't have to wait that long. At the end of the 7th bhumi, or the beginning of the 8th bhumi, depending on your interpretation, all of the innate afflictions are abandoned on that uninterrupted path and that liberated path that separates the 7th from the 8th bhumi. So on the 8th, 9th, and 10th bhumis, all of the afflictions, all of the view of the transitory collection is totally annihilated at that point. Okay, Jennifer, you have thought.
Yes, thank you. I have a question, Venerable George. Just relating this with the direct realization of emptiness. So is this the process that happens when one is outside of meditative equipoise? I'm just trying to understand.
Which processes?
The abandonment of the subtler
the grosser or the subtler?
No, the innate afflictive obscurations.
So any abandonment is done in meditative equipoise. So all done in meditative equipoise. In meditative equipoise, you don't know that they're abandoned. You don't have any thoughts at all at that point. You have a direct realization of emptiness, and mental, with your mental consciousness, and that particular consciousness doesn't have any conceptual thought at all at that point. It's only direct realization. There's no thinking, oh, this is emptiness. Isn't that good? Or now I'm free, or anything like that. On the uninterrupted path, that means when you're in meditative equipoise and previously, the previous moment, up to that previous moment, you developed all the cooperative conditions necessary to abandon some more of the innate afflictions. On the uninterrupted path, you are abandoning them. And at the moment that they're abandoned, the name of that meditative equipoise is called the liberated path, or the path of deliverance. Again, there's not, and at that point, they are abandoned. On the uninterrupted path, you are abandoning them. On the liberated path, they are abandoned. Still, there's no conception, oh, now I'm free. It's only when you rise from that meditative equipoise, and you get your senses back, and you think, oh, they're abandoned. You have a memory of that experience. You know that you've realized emptiness again, and you have what's called, what is it called? The knowledge of the exhaustion of contaminations, which is one of the, when we talk about the 5 siddhis, remember that there's difference between siddhi and riddhi. The siddhis, the first of the 5 common siddhis is called riddhi, and then there's clairvoyance of others' minds and so forth and so on. And then the 6th one is actually called the knowledge of the extinguishment of contaminations, or what did Paul say? What did you say? That means what?
I'm sorry, Venerable George.
Yeah. What the 6th siddhi? What is the 6th siddhi? Is it the common siddhis and the uncommon siddhi?
Yeah.
5 common siddhis, and the 6th, the uncommon siddhi is.
I'm drawing.
It's actually technically called the knowledge of the extinguishment of contaminations. That means at that point, it's not like the common cities, like walking through walls or knowing others' minds or, divine eye or divine ear, but it is the knowledge in that post-meditation that, I've extinguished. These things are abandoned. That's an answer to Jennifer's question. So it's not in meditative equipoise that they're abandoned. It's not on the uninterrupted path or the liberated path when you're only in direct realization. After that, when you arise from that, you have the knowledge that your contaminations or the afflictions, certain afflictions to be abandoned by that path, are abandoned.
Thank you, Venerable. Sorry, I have a more basic question then.
Okay.
Something I'm not understanding correctly. So then, if you do have a direct realization of emptiness, which is emptiness of the self-sufficient, substantially existent person, why would you still have certain innate afflictive obscurations relating to those?
So we do have, there are innate versions of the grasping to the self as being self-supporting, substantially existent, right? There is an innate version of that. There also is a intellectually formed version of that. That part was already abandoned on the path of seeing. The innate part continues on. There's still subtler and subtler versions of that, like there are subtler and subtler versions of grasping to the self as being inherently existent, up into the point of reaching the eighth bhumi. So that self-supporting, the grasping to the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent, is the innate version of that is being slowly abandoned. Once you are abandoning the grasping to the self as being inherently existent, because that view, the view of the self as being inherently existent, precedes the view of the self as being self-supporting, substantially existent. Once you've totally eliminated the view of the self as being inherently existent, you're a Mahayana Arhat. At that point, there's no basis any longer for the innate view of the person as being self-supporting, substantially existent to be present. There's that view is also extinguished at that time. Okay, maybe think about it a little bit. But Don, you have a question?
Yeah, regarding the 37 harmonies. On the fourth leg, the legs of manifestation, the term is used analytical, meditative stabilization, and the next three is just meditative stabilization. Does that mean at that level, the third level, our primary practice is analytical meditation?
Which branch are you talking about?
Third, four legs of manifestation are the basis of power and the other.
Right. So according to Jeffrey's translation, aspiration, right? Effort or joyous effort, thought, as opposed to Jimpa saying mind, and the fourth one, analytical meditative stabilization. So that would mean the ability, that would be essentially vipassana, right? The ability to analyze within meditative stabilization. It's not sufficient just to have meditative stabilization or samadhi or shamatha, because that alone is a state that's just able to hold something in mind without analyzing it. You need to be able to analyze within that meditative stabilization. Okay, what are you thinking?
So is this the union of calm abiding and special insight then?
It's not saying it's the union. It is the union, but it's not saying that. It's just saying analytical meditative stabilization. How does Jimpa translates that as what? analysis in the form of concentration. So that would mean indirectly, it's actually just talking about the vipassana, but indirectly, it's talking about the union of shamatha and vipassana. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So hopefully, if you go back and look at this, that in our next class, Jennifer will have thought about her question about the self-supporting, substantially existent person, other questions. You may have some questions at the beginning, and we're going to then begin the 5th bhumi. Hooray. Okay. So any last questions before we finish up? Diana, either of the two Dianas? No? You both have glasses. Okay, you kind of look the same. Doris, anything? Aida? You're fine?
Well, Sean has a question, and then I'll make a comment.
Oh, I didn't. Oh, Sean has a question. Okay, Sean.
Well, some other people were suggesting I ask you this because I have a copy of chapter 6 from Geshe Sopa's course we did that says it's from the master's program.
Right.
Is that something that you can get with access to FPMT sources?
Yes, I think so. So what happened there was that Joan, Venerable Joan Nysel, or Nysel, kind of after I left, because I was translating the Madhyamaka Vatara, and after I left, Geshe Jampa Gyatso was teaching Gompa Ropsel, so she sort of did the same thing for Gompa Ropsel. She tried. There were a lot of preliminary, anytime you do a translation for the first time, there were some, corrections to be made. She augmented into that, I think, I'm not absolutely certain, I think she augmented in Anne Klein's translation for the first 7 stanzas. Is that right?
Yeah, the first part starts out with Anne Klein, and then when you get to
right, then at a certain portion, it's Jones alone. And then there was another section later that Jeffrey Hopkins provided that has never been published, I think, other than what he provided to, I think to Joan, maybe it was Sangi Kondo or someone. So that master's program translation, I will see if I have a copy of it or if it can be made available. So that would either you can get Anne Klein's edition, and Jeffrey again, Paul again. What's the name of that text again?
I think it's Path to the Middle, the oral scholarship of Khensur Yeshe Tupten, something like that.
Path to the Middle. So if you look on Amazon or your bookstore. And I'm not sure, I believe that's quoted in the master's program edition of the translation, which was, that superseded Joan's translation of the first part. And then there's a portion by Joan. Then there's another portion that's Jeffrey Hopkins' words. And then the rest is Joan's words at the end. So I'll see if I can get that for people.
So I guess my question is, are you saying that the master, I'm sorry, Don had his hand up, so.
Yeah, no, go on, to finish your thought.
Okay, I guess my question is then, is the entirety of the path to the middle in the FPMT master's program, or is it just bits and pieces?
It's not the entirety. I don't think she has the footnotes. the copious footnotes in Anne Klein's edition. Paul,
But the
did you work
text is,
on-
but the text is,
My text just says the first 22 pages are from Anne Klein.
I see.
I'm sorry, Venerable George, what were you saying?
So I was just asking Paul if he'd worked on that text, if he knows.
As far as I know, there's different parts of it. There's the translation itself, but then I believe there's also a separate section of oral commentary by Kensei Yeshe Tupten, if I remember
Right.
correctly.
So if you get the book, you get all of the details. I think Joan would have only used the actual translation of Gompa Rapsel that's found in that book. But in Anne's book, there's a preface and then the translation, footnotes, and then the commentary by the Kensei Rinpoche that she was working with. Don, what do you think?
I just, are we going to have, do we get in next week the old method of getting into this meeting, or is there a new one?
Say again?
I'm curious about how to get into the meeting next week. Do we go
Right.
back to the old
So
method? Or is there a new one?
whatever link you used now is the new link. The link that we had before, I'd mentioned at the beginning, I had logged in with the old link. And so we prevented, in doing so, Karen was also here and William was here. We had all logged into the old link, and that prevented you from getting in with the new link because it said this room is already used or something. So the link that you use to get here now is the link that we'll use until whatever we stop in August or whatever.
Until samsara ends?
Until, not until samsara ends. Does that work for you, Don? Does that make sense?
Yes, I have to look at that link, I guess. Are there new codes in there and so forth?
It's a different code. And I mentioned at the beginning, I think at the Shantideva Center, for each 8 class unit, they come out with a new Zoom link so that people are encouraged to sign up for the next section. Okay, William, you have a question?
It's just, I found the Anne Klein's book on academia.edu as a PDF. So if somebody,
okay.
wants it for free, they have often have good things there. I think it's the whole book.
Can you put
Okay.
the link in the chat?
I don't know if I know how to do that, but academia.edu, and then don't droid
Okay.
anything.
If it's there, I will post it, or someone will post it on our Facebook page. Okay. Okay. A lot of nuts and bolts, but today was from Ron Klein to everyone. Discussion group meets via Zoom. Okay. So we will have our discussion group on Monday. He's put the link up there. Those of you who have time, join us. It's a nice group. We go over more nuts and bolts. So let's end with our dedication. Karen, could you put up the dedication and long life prayer for the quick return of Lama Zopa? Okay. So, due to these virtues, Gewadi, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings, all migrators without exception, into that enlightened state. So this is our conventional dedication. Thinking we've created virtuous karma today, and we're also dedicating virtuous karma we've created in the past, and even dedicating the virtuous karma that we will create in the future to our achievement of the state of enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. may the supreme jewel bodhicitta, or precious bodhicitta, that has not arisen, arise and grow, one of these four factors of, endeavor and so forth, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase evermore, more and more. Then to our spiritual, there we go. Back to our spiritual teachers, Dalai Lamas, the Geshe Zopas, the Glenn Mullins, whoever, you who are eyes for my viewing of the infinite scriptures. You are my pathway, my interface to be able to understand them. Supreme gateway for the fortunate ones like ourselves who are traveling to liberation, engaging with skillful means, moved by mercy, moved by love, sewa in Tibetan, like we say migme sewe. All illuminating spiritual friends, please live long and stable lives. And then the long life of the prayer for the quick identification of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reincarnation. You, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious, the conqueror Losang Drakpa, Lama Tsongkhapa, who is the spiritual father to his two sons, spiritual sons, Kedrup J and Galsub J, along with the lineage masters, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms. Please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness of accomplishing this prayer. You could go up a little, holding and spreading, you Lama Zopa, who held and spread the Shakyamuni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, through, lung and, realization. You wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable, venerable Guru, to you I make this request. While striving single-pointedly, both for the sake of the conqueror's teachings, which is the sole gateway through which all benefits and happiness emerge, as well as for striving for living beings, mother sentient beings, you suddenly departed to peace, which was a great shock to us. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truth of the blessings, the oceanic blessings of the three jewels, and the waves, the great waves of bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, may the smile of a reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for us fortunate disciples. And then seal those dedications in the emptiness of the three spheres, the virtues that we've created, both merits and collection of wisdom, are not inherently existent. They're merely named. They appear to our mind as somehow substantial. The goals dedicated to our achievement of enlightenment, the quick identification of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's reincarnation, seem like identifiable or even visual, as though we could visualize them. They don't inherently exist. They're merely appearances that are named but lack any atom of inherent existence. And the act of dedication, joining these virtues and merits to the goals that we dedicate them to, is just a mental process. It can't, the act of dedication can't be found anywhere. It's just merely labeled to that collection. Sealing the conventional dedication in the emptiness of the three spheres protects these virtues to the extent that we realize emptiness, protects them from being destroyed ever until we achieve enlightenment by anger, wrong view, abandoning the Dharma, and so forth. Okay, thank you so much for your concentration and your your patience. We had some difficulties joining up today. Hopefully those will all be ironed out. Hope to see some of you on Monday and certainly next week. Be good. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your patience.